But you call yourself a feminist. The journalist looked straight at me. On the table between us lay a tape recorder. There was something about the tone of her voice that made it sound like she'd asked me a really bold question. We were at a cafe in Prague, and the interview was about my book, Women in Battle. I was a bit surprised because the answer was obvious, right? For the last hour, I'd been talking about the history of the women's movement, the ongoing struggle for abortion rights, and the importance of working to achieve full gender equality worldwide. Of course, I'm a feminist. The journalist then told me that feminism was seen as quite controversial in the Czech Republic and that it wasn't that normal to use the word about yourself. Over the years, I've had similar conversations in Russia, Italy, Serbia, Poland, Hungary, Brazil. I've met feminists all over that for various reasons feel stigmatized in their home country where outdated prejudices lives on. You know, feminists are aggressive, bitter, ugly, man haters, and so on. This is, of course, the main reason why so many women are still afraid of using the F word. Many people seem to believe that feminism is a gender struggle, that one side is supposed to win and the other is destined to lose, as though freedom was like a cake for us to share, where more to you means less for me. But that is wrong, of course. The truth is, we all win in a more equal society. In the book The Spirit Level, the British authors Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson write about this close link between a country's economic and social equality and its level of welfare. In short, countries with small income gaps and a high level of equality score consistently better on issues like health, well-being, economy, and happiness. And countries that clench to traditional gender roles, they lose out on several fronts. On a regular basis, we are presented with rankings that measure a country's level of equality. And the Nordic countries, they are usually on top of these lists. In my home country, Norway, women do very well in relation to men within education, labor market, political life, and you name it. This does not mean that Scandinavian women are better feminists than others, or that all our problems regarding equality has been solved, because they certainly haven't. But because we have been lucky enough to have the authorities on our side in a number of important issues, women in Scandinavia live freer lives than many others. And since we have achieved so much, I believe that we have a responsibility to pass on our experiences beyond the Nordic region, while at the same time supporting all of those who are sailing against the wind at the moment, because there is a lot at stake right now. Recently, we've seen authoritarian leaders seizing power in a number of countries like Hungary, Poland, Turkey, Brazil, and until recently, the United States. These are forces that threaten freedom of speech. They are threatening gay rights and women's sovereignty to their own bodies. This means, among other things, that the access to birth control is actually getting worse at the moment, and it's becoming more difficult for many women to have safe abortions. What these patriarchs are really dreaming about is to turn the time back to a time when women were women and men were men. That's what they say. Why can't women be women and men be men? They mean a time when women were at home and were just dependent on their spouses and had lots of children, and no one had heard about LGBT or anything like that. I believe that misogyny the hatred of women is very often toned down in the public debate on the new right-winged populist movements. But it is important to see how closely they are linked. Fascists, they are looking for meaning within old fellowships. They're propagating bygone gender roles, old hierarchies, the traditional nuclear family, of course, and also the dream of ethnically pure nations. We have to recognize this backlash across the nations, the national borders, because it is only white heterosexual men who can afford to be nostalgic and dream about the good old times. Because for everyone else, there's not much inspiration to pick up in the past. For us, it's the future that matters. That's where our dreams and hopes lie. Historically, feminism has been about modernization. The women's movement has continually strived to adapt old norms, old traditions, and old ways of thinking, and work out some new ones for modern times and modern people. Some will always oppose the breaking of traditions. That's natural, but they will normally lose in the long run because the world is rolling forward slowly but surely. My favorite philosopher, Simone de Beauvoir, no surprise there. She said, never forget that a political, economical, or religious crisis will be enough to cast doubt on women's rights. History has proven her right again and again, and also today. Just a few weeks into the COVID pandemic, we got reports from the UN and from other aid organizations that clearly showed us how this virus affected people in very different ways. It should go without saying that this is a class issue like everything else. It hits the poor harder than the rich and women harder than men. For example, immediately after people were ordered to stay in their homes, there was a huge increase in violence against women and children. Many women and children all over the world was suddenly locked up with their abusers. And unfortunately, the closer people are packed together, the greater the risk that violent men will take their frustration out on others. Also, when it comes to economics, the crisis has been particularly negative for women. The financial imbalance between the sexes is already massive. Men hold a far greater share of the world's total values than women. They all own more land, more property, more businesses, more banks, more stocks, while women often have more insecure jobs and are more often single parents. This all means that women are far less equipped to withstand a setback. Throughout history, women have often been treated like a form of reserve labor, which means that when unemployment increases, men are given priority. The same goes for schooling. If a poor family have to choose between sending a daughter or a son to school, the boy is given priority. Very many girls who had to stay at home from school in the beginning of the pandemic, they will never return. Instead, they have to help at home, earning money or helping with unpaid homework. Even in Norway, we do have reports that the pandemic has pulled equality in the wrong direction. Surveys conducted by the Norwegian Gender Equality Center concluded that traditional gender roles have been strengthened the last couple of years. When a huge part of the society was suddenly closed down, family life became more intensified. Suddenly, there was a lot more of the unpaid household work like childcare, shopping, cooking, and women reported that they now spend much more time doing tasks that they already did most of before. I believe that many people also might have felt that it was natural that who earned the least, usually the mother, was the one to take the main responsibility for children and homeschooling. And in that way, make time so that the one who earns the most, which is usually the father, could work in quiet and peace. Uh, Interesting enough, there are more men that have their own, that have already their own home office in the house. While she may have to clear some space at the kitchen table for her computer, he is more likely to have a room with a door that he can close behind him. And in many families, it might also feel a little bit easier for the children to disturb their mother than their father when they're working. In the women's movement in the 1970s, people started to talk about working double shifts, which meant that many women had to first they did their usual paid work outside of the home, and then when they got home, it was time to start the second shift with all the unpaid work in the house, picking up in the kindergarten, shopping for food and dinner, washing clothes, and so on. Today, this type of homework is much more evenly distributed between the sexes in the Nordic countries. But now, gender equality researchers have started to talk about what they call a third shift. Somebody calls it emotional work, and it's got to do with the organization of family life. In contrast to more specific housework, such as laundry and cooking, this is not registered in the equality service. Um, but it still fills most women's time and heads constantly. You know, have I remembered that Maya needs new slippers? And what size is she wearing? Did we get that costume for the carnival? And remember, there's a cake I have to bake for Sunday and it has to be gluten free. And doesn't her hair look a bit greasy? I have to ask her to take a shower tonight. And do we have sunscreen? The kids have to write a wish list for grandma. Which house in Harry Potter this Sander belongs to anyway? Was it Hufflepuff? No, Gryffindor. And so on and so on. This invisible work of love, it goes on all the time. And if the family fails at these tasks, it's usually the woman, the mother, who feels the struggle with the bad conscience. Women who don't act servile and cheerful in public often risk being seen as aggressive or difficult. You know, the resting bitch face, if you heard about that. Women are often socialized into being being to smiling and making everybody feels comfortable. The endless insistence that feminists are grumpy has a number of uncomfortable aspects. Of course, it's a big generalization about a large group of women, but it's also a way of stressing that a woman who is committed, who's fighting for something, is unladylike or unattractive. As a result, many girls use their energy defending themselves against the claim that they're angry instead of engaging themselves in more sensible issues. It has struck me that society is far more accepting of other traditional oppressed groups being angry about their history than it is of women doing the same. Western women are expected to have gotten over it by now. For example, the fact that the literary canon is full of misogynistic men, that is something we just have to accept. Aristotle, Nietzsche, Kant, Rousseau, Baudelaire, Strindberg, They were just men of their time, you know. Misogyny is treated like some kind of curiosity, vague personality trait, perhaps, but certainly not something that should be allowed to overshadow the rest of his great ideas and art history. But isn't it true that misogyny very often has been kept alive by philosophers and humanists who should have known better? After all, these are men who have been concerned with the individual's right to freedom and justice, and who have promoted ideals like democracy and equality, but only just for men. Should we just forgive and forget? I don't believe that I can, because I get angry. I am angry at all the male historians and biographers who treat women like unimportant supporting characters. They might dedicate a few paragraphs to her in the doorstep of a book about the man. Why weren't they more curious about the women? I'm angry at the men who never attend my lectures, or any other women's lectures for that matter. If the theme is gender or gender equality, men stay away, because it's women's issues in their minds. I'm angry at the lack of interest they show us, about how they never quote women, never would declare a woman genius. When they see that a book has a female author or that the movie is about women, they'll choose something else again and again. And we know it. But we usually bite our tongues because we know that if we become angry, they'll write us off, rule us out. Crazy feminist chick, you know. Well, I know that telling people that they should dare to be angry or braver might sound easy for someone living in Norway. In many countries, being brave can mean risking everything. And we constantly hear examples of that. But if you live in a country where all you risk is becoming a bit unpopular, then we should dare to go all out, at least once in a while. Let them brand you as a red stocking or call you feminazi. Accept that you might not be seen as the cool girl in the office, because someone has to be the one who speaks out to the politicians, to the boss, or to old classmates on Facebook. You have to say that you really can't talk about women like that, or what you just said is racist, or why is there only male board members here? Again and again, we have to speak out. So, if all the writers on your syllabus are men, speak out. Send an email, write a tweet, or make a phone call. If your workplace has a dress code that requires women to wear high heels and tight skirts while the men are allowed to wear something much more comfortable, speak out. If the clothing store at your local mall is sexualizing little girls, if someone is sending you unwanted pictures of erect penises, speak out. If all the statues in your city are of men, if there's only white people on the stage at the conference, if all the men at your workplace earn more than all the women, make some noise. No one can be brave all the time. No one can fight continually. But sometimes you suddenly realize that now, right now, I have to stand up, stand right in the middle of this shit and risk becoming really unpopular because this issue is burning for me. I have to fight this one. Equality is the goal and feminism is the way. Thank you.